In 1950, the Minneapolis Lakers beat the Syracuse Nationals in the first ever NBA Finals. George Mikan led his Lakers to this championship with 27 points and 14 rebounds a game. 73 years later, we've seen so many more great championship teams. From George Mikan and the Minneapolis Lakers to Steph Curry and the Warriors, we've seen some phenomenal teams. But not every championship is built equal. Of course, a ring is a ring. Some championships are harder or easier than others. So today, we're going to find the greatest team that's ever graced the floors of the NBA, using just stats. In this video, we're going to find the greatest team ever. This is a super loaded question. Where do we even start? There's so many different small nuances that go into answering this grand question. Using a series of different metrics, we're going to attempt to answer this question as objectively as possible. We're going to use numbers from the seasons of 1959 and 60 to the season of 2021 and 22, because I can guarantee you, without any numbers, the best team of all time is not from the 50s or 40s. Every championship winning team from each season in between those years will be used. So that means no teams that almost won but didn't. This means 63 different individual teams will be eligible to compete against each other for the highly regarded title of the best team of all time. Whatever team ranks the highest will receive the most points, which is 63, because there are 63 different teams, meaning 63 different years. Second will receive 62, third will receive 61, and so on until the team that ranks dead last in the category receives 1 point. All of the points from each category will be added to each year's combined total. Whatever team has the most points is the winner. So without further ado, let's get into it. We're going to use 6 different metrics to judge each team with: SRS, margin of victory, wins, offensive rating, defensive rating, and true shooting. We're really limited with the amount of specific categories of numbers we can use here, because a majority of these advanced numbers used today weren't around for the majority of these years. So we'll have to keep it simple, but effective. The first one we're going to use is SRS, or Simple Rating System. This stat attempts to quantify truly how good a team is overall. You see, SRS is calculated by margin of victory, which is how much on average you beat a team, minus strength of schedule. It's a really good stat because it's not too complicated. It's easy to compare teams against each other with this stat without too much headache, and it's been available since day one of the NBA. You guys are only going to see the top 10, because if I did show you every team for every category, your head would hurt at the end of the video with the amount of numbers you would see. So for aesthetic measures and simplicity, on the screen right now, you're going to see a top 10 of SRS. The 1971 Milwaukee Bucks claim dibs on this category, followed by the 1996 Bulls and the 1972 LA Lakers. Next, we're going to look at margin of victory. Margin of victory shows us on average how many points a team wins by. As we can see, the leaders of the stat are very similar to SRS, because a majority of SRS is margin of victory. Similar teams like the 72 Lakers, 71 Bucks, 96 Bulls, and 2017 Warriors dominate this list. Next, let's look at a stat you guys are all familiar with: wins. The 2016 Warriors could have won this, but LeBron had other plans, so the winner of this category is the 1996 Bulls with their iconic 72-10 record season. We're seeing a lot of the same teams up here. Several of the MJ Bulls, Curry Warriors, the Bucks, and Lakers from the 70s. It really goes to show you how SRS and margin of victory translates to wins. Next, we're going to look at offensive rating. Offensive rating is the amount of points a team scores in 100 possessions, so it makes things a little bit even for all eras of different paces. The 2021 Milwaukee Bucks win this category, followed by the 1987 Lakers and the 2017 Warriors. The Showtime Lakers, Splash Brother Warriors, and MJ Bulls take up 90% of this top 10. Next, we're going to move on to the polar opposite of this stat: defensive rating. Defensive rating is the amount of points a team gives up in 100 possessions. As we can see here, Bill Russell's Celtics take over this top 10, controlling all of the top 9. If you ever wondered where the saying "defense wins championships" comes from, look no further than this list right here. The Bill Russell Celtics dominate this list, just like they dominated a whole decade of basketball. A big reason why the 60s Celtics dominated defensively so well is because of the officiating. Back then, offense wasn't catered to nearly as much as it is nowadays, but that's a topic for another video, which I've talked about before. Anyways, let's look at our final stat: true shooting. True shooting is a shooting percentage that takes 2-pointers, 3-pointers, and free throws into account. We see many of the same teams that we saw from offensive rating: the 2021 Bucks, 3 of the Splash Brother Warriors teams, and the Showtime Lakers. 8 of the top 10 teams are from 2013 or later, showing the importance of analytics and efficiency in today's game. So with all of that wrapped up, who scored the most points? Who won? The team that racked up the most points is the 2017 Golden State Warriors, followed up by the 1996 Chicago Bulls. I mean, you can't say you were surprised by that. 2 teams you would expect to dominate. Let's go through the list. The green area means that this was a phenomenal championship team, relatively compared. In this section, we have teams like 2 of the Curry Warriors teams, 4 of the 6 MJ Bulls, the 70s Lakers and Bucks, the 2008 Celtics, which surprised me, and the 80s Celtics and Showtime Lakers. Yellow means it's an above-average championship team. In this section, we see several of the 60s Celtics teams, 2 of the 80s Celtics teams, some of the 2000s Lakers teams, and other recent teams like the 05 Spurs, 2019 Raptors, and 2018 Warriors. Orange means it's a below-average championship team. In this section, we see a mixed bag here. We have some teams like the 60s Celtics teams, the Bad Boy Pistons, the 2016 Cavs, the Dirk Mavs, the 2011 Heat, and you have every chip from the 2020s with the Lakers, Bucks, and Warriors. Now, red means the championship team wasn't that great compared to other years. In this category, you have a lot of the forgotten championships in NBA history. Teams like the 04 Pistons, 06 Heat, 77 Trailblazers, and the majority of the 60s Celtics and several 70s championships. Okay, how does it look by era though? Which time periods had the best championships? Well, it's really all over the place. Taking a quick glance at it, there's no era that really jumps out at you as the best era. The 60s and 70s finished at the bottom with combined scores of every team in their decade of 1,671 and 1,527. The 2000s are next after that with a score of 1,946. After that, the 80s, 90s, and 2010s are all very close, all within 30 points of each other. Third is the 2010s with 2,134 points. Second is the 90s with 2,137. And first is the 80s with 2,164 points. Now, this is all great, but what about the playoffs? The most important and crucial part of the season for winning a championship. The NBA is just starting to pick up again after the exciting and much needed All-Star break. So what better time to place your bets with your favorite teams? Go bet over with our friends at BetUS and receive a 125% sportsbook bonus upon initial deposit using the link in the description. Well, I sure didn't forget the playoffs. We're going to be doing something very similar with the postseason stats that we did with the regular season, except we're going to be using different numbers. We're going to be using 3 different stats: winning percentage, opponent SRS, and net rating. We're going to start with winning percentage. Over time, as the league has evolved and expanded, the amount of playoff series has increased. This means more recent teams will have played more games than older teams. So going purely off of wins, how I did this before is a no-go. So winning percentage only makes sense. The 2017 Golden State Warriors had the best winning percentage at 94.1%, followed up by the 2001 Lakers, who probably would have tied this if they had played a 7-game series in the first round. The 83 76ers and the 89 Pistons follow them up. Okay, let's look at the next stat: strength of opponents. We're going to view the strength of opponents by adding up the SRS points, the stat we used before, of each opponent that the championship team played against. Like I said before, because as the NBA has expanded over time with more teams, we've seen more playoff series get implemented. Because of this, we can't just use a total of all the SRS scores. So we're going to use an average opponent SRS score per series to adjust for older generations. The 1972 Lakers and the 1973 Knicks faced the hardest competition. The 2000 Lakers, despite having one of the best winning percentages in playoffs of all time, also faced some of the best competition. Finally, we're going to look at net rating. Net rating is the point differential per 100 possessions. The 2001 Lakers are phenomenal in the playoffs. Despite playing against the best competition of any playoff run, they had one of the best records and the highest margin of victory of any other team. Truly dominant. The 2017 Warriors, 71 bucks, and 2 of Jordan's Bulls followed them up. So what do the final playoff rankings look like? The 2001 LA Lakers are the victors of the postseason. It only makes sense. Like we mentioned before, they dominated every category. Let's go through these rankings. You have the usual suspects, the 2017 Warriors, and several of the MJ Bulls at the top. The 2016 Cavs came back 3-1 in the finals, showing everyone their playoff dominance. Other than that, there's no real patterns or trends in this list. No one played bad in the playoffs here, because they all won a championship. Okay, but how about the total rankings? What team was the best combined with the regular season and postseason dominance? Well, that would look like this. The 2017 Golden State Warriors are the best team in NBA history. Well, at least according to our numbers. Followed up with the 1996 and 97 Bulls. The 2017 Warriors had a 20-point lead compared to anyone else below them. Similar to what we did with the regular season stats, let's take a look at this through multiple different lenses. Right here, we have a color-coordinated graph of the championship rankings based off of decades. The 60s are red, the 70s are orange, the 80s are yellow, the 90s are green, the 2000s are blue, the 2010s are pink, and the 20s are white. The Golden State Warriors with Curry hold the majority of power in the 2010s decade. The 90s are controlled by the Jordan Bulls. The 80s have some variety, but it's mainly the Larry Bird Celtics and the Showtime Lakers. The 70s have the 71 Bucks and 72 Lakers on a mountain compared to the rest of their decade. It's pretty similar with the 60s. The only team from that decade that cracks the top fourth of this list is the 1967 76ers. Surprisingly enough, the 2008 Celtics are the highest ranking team from the 2000s decade, with the 07 Spurs and the 09 Lakers trailing them. And the best team from the 2020s, the 2022 Warriors, don't even crack the top 50% of the list. In terms of what decade racked up the most points, the 10s finished with the highest total of 3,320. In second place, we have the 90s, coming in 26 points short with 3,294 points. In third place was the 80s with 3,168. In fourth place are the 2000s with 2,943 points. In fifth, with considerably less points than the rest of the pack, we have the 60s with 2,394. In sixth and in last is the 70s with 2,311 points. This next variation of how the championship teams are presented, I believe, tells the best story. As you guys can see, the colors changed. Teams that are green represent the top 1 to 25% of championship teams. They span from 350 to 500 points, meaning they were phenomenal compared to other chips. Teams that are yellow represent the top 26 to 50% of championship teams. They span from 285 to 400 points, meaning they were above average compared to other ring-winning rosters. Teams that are orange can represent the top 51 to 75% of championship teams. They span from 225 points to 285 points, meaning they were below average compared to other historic teams on the list. And the teams that are red show the top 76 to 100% of championship teams. They span from 0 to 225 points, meaning they really weren't all that impressive relatively compared to other chips. As we can see, the league didn't start off too hot. The majority of championships won in these eras were relatively weak compared to other years. However, you do have pockets of excellence, like the 1976 76ers, the 1971 Bucks, and the 1972 Lakers. After that, we run into what I like to call the dark ages of the NBA. These years were really forgettable for the NBA. There wasn't a lot of innovation pushing the league forward. Besides Kareem, the star power in the league at this point was at an all-time low, and of course, they had 6 years in a row of weak championships. Moving on, we start to see some light at the end of the tunnel. Teams like the 83 Sixers, the Larry Bird Celtics, and the Showtime Lakers all flex their dominance. Shortly after that, we see the immersion of the strongest rated dynasty on the list. The Jordan Bulls have 4 green rated years and are the 6th highest ranked teams in the 90s. The next green years we see are the 08 Celtics, and the Spurs in 2 years, 2007 and 2014. Finally, the most recent green years were the Warriors in 2015 and 2017. Although it's impossible to perfectly assess and compare each championship against each other, what we did in this video was about as close to perfect as you'll come. It's really crazy what stats can tell you about certain players and teams. If you manage to uncover the right ones, it can really reveal you an undeniable story of the successors of the NBA. I think these results are pretty accurate, but maybe that's just me. Let me know in the comments down below your thoughts of the video and the results we uncovered.